Thank you. I have nothing to disclose. And today, really what I want to do is take you through some ideas regarding personal leadership, leading from within, leading without a title, and finally, how some of these ideas really play into our practice paradigm of anesthesiology. So, this idea was first sort of presented to me way back in the day when I was a resident. Our chairman sat us down around the table and he said, "How do you become an agent of change? What do you do?" And for me, it was very simple. For me, it has to begin with the self. It has to begin with me. And what I didn't realize that I was really talking about was this idea of personal leadership. This is different than a positional leadership, an assigned title that you're given. This is something that, as was alluded to earlier, women do every single day, especially in anesthesia and especially in the operating room. So personal leadership, what is it? It's leadership of the self. It's defined by your own essence. It's who you want to be and what you want to do. Many experts who teach leadership on a regular basis really feel like personal leadership is really going to be the most important leadership by the 21st century. One such expert is Joelle J. Ms. J is an executive coach. She's been an executive coach around the world. And she wrote this great book that really explored ideas of personal leadership. And basically, to summarize it, she says, in an unselfish way, putting yourself first. And really what that means is make sure you're taking the time to really decide within yourself, this is absolutely something I want to do. This is in line with my values. And this makes me happy. After that, really trying to define a path and define your own goals. And lastly, it's really asking yourself on a regular basis, who is it that I need to be? How is it that I need to act to be my personal best every day? Now, she walks through 10 steps in this book, and if you're looking for a good read on this, I really would encourage you. For the purposes of today, we're just going to go through 3. First is this idea of clarity. And again, the whole idea being really taking the time to ask yourself, is this what I do every day in my professional and personal life? Is this really what I want to do? Is it in line with my values? Does it make me happy? And then secondly, sort of defining a path with your own goals at the end. As you journey on and you do this on a regular basis, you slowly start to really develop clarity about what ultimately your goals are going to be. This can change a lot as you change as an individual. It might be different 10 years ago than it is now. For those of you in the audience who are really struggling to say, I don't really know if what I do every day makes me happy, I would really, again, encourage this book. It's got a number of exercises and worksheets that can really take you through some processes to sort of help you start this process, which can be very overwhelming. Second step that I want to talk to you about is fulfillment. This is an easy one. So define, again, what is it that you're doing? Is it in line with your values? Does it give you an inner sense of peace? Because if it does, then very likely when you have to make sacrifices, and many of us do in our professional and personal lives, it's much easier for us to justify because these are things that we automatically believe in and value. Lastly, feeling fulfillment can really improve quality of life. It's much easier to integrate both your professional and personal life if you are doing things on a regular basis that make you happy and fulfilled. So what about fulfillment and burnout? We've heard a lot about burnout in our own home institutions, even here at IARS. I've heard a number of discussions about burnout. And just to remind you, the most common validated tool to evaluate burnout in individuals across many industries is called the Maslick Burnout Inventory. And it really tries to evaluate 3 things in an individual. First, emotional exhaustion. Second, depersonalization. And again, that's the idea that what you're doing every day, you're quite detached from. And lastly is this idea of personal accomplishment. And again, personal accomplishment really making a lot of parallels with fulfillment. And in fact, a group of academic psychologists and psychiatrists at Stanford published this paper last year looking to validate a professional fulfillment tool in physicians that could more easily detect burnout. And what I want to draw your eye to is the right here, the bar graph. Now, this is what's called a Cohen D Effect in statistics. That's a fancy word for look at the big numbers, okay? Because the higher the numbers go, the more likely it is that two variables are actually associated. So the blue ones are the physicians that reported having some burnout. So there weren't a whole lot. Generally, the majority of people that they polled didn't have any burnout. Next, look at the yellow ones. The yellow ones were those with no burnout, but had no fulfillment. Really felt like they, on a daily basis, coming to work, had no fulfillment in their lives. And then lastly, I'll point you to the gray bars. And these were folks that had no burnout, but also did have fulfillment. And really, the suggestion here is that when we do live our lives every day and find fulfillment in what we do, it may be protective against burnout. So lastly, I want to bring up this idea of maximizing time. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point of time management, because really what it comes down to is we need 28 hours in the day, right? 24 is not enough. But really, I want to take some time to make a couple of points that Ms. J made that I thought were very good. And first is busier and more stressful does not necessarily yield more successful. Secondly is this idea of with the time that you have to manage, make sure that it aligns with what you want to do. What are your goals? What are your values? And what makes you happy? And lastly is this idea of multitasking versus unitasking. So, and really these are tasks that generally take a whole lot more focused time. And really having a whole lot of interruptions while you're trying to accomplish these tasks can be very inefficient. So I'm just going to show you the pink here versus the blue. Unitasking, you start on a task, you finish it, you start the next task, you finish it. Look below. This is really a whole series of interruptions, and in the same period of time, you may not have completed either task. So how does personal leadership really play into leading from within? So Lolly Daskell is definitely a world authority on leading within. She's traveled the world talking about this. She's coached many executives, including a number in the C-suites, really about leading within. And really the reason she got to this is because she very quickly noticed, and this is what she really talks about in her book, is there's really a big gap between what leaders and executives want to be and what they have the capability and the tools to be. And really what she found was most effective in bridging that gap is teaching them these ideas of leading from within. And really the essence of it is this: if you get up every day and you're doing what you want to do and it fulfills you, and you go and start being part of a team dynamic, over time you're going to develop a lot of trust. You're going to develop a lot of credibility. You're going to also ultimately develop a lot of influence. And ultimately, the idea is this is what can be exploited to be an agent of change. There are a whole series of things that she really discusses that define folks that lead from within. I've listed some here, and none should be too shocking to you. So Robin Sharma, yet another sort of authority on this type of subject, writes a book called The Leader Who Had No Title. And really he uses this acronym IMAGE to really convey some of the characteristics that these leaders have. First idea is innovation. So dream big. So in your team, when you want to make changes, go ahead and have a lofty goal, but settle in and get prepared, because it's going to be baby steps every day that's really going to give you fidelity and really going to make a lasting change. Secondly is mastery. And be so good that people cannot ignore you. This wonderful comedian, Steve Martin, used this and felt like it was really the essence of his professional career and his success. Authenticity, work with your values, express your original voice. Really make sure that what you're doing really aligns with your values again. Guts, you're always going to have the haters. When you're in a team dynamic and you're trying to make process changes, you're going to have a number of people that are going to question you. Dr. Smith, we've tried this 10 times before and it didn't work. Well, this time it's going to work because we're going to keep on trying to do it. Because certainly the path of least resistance is just to stop, right? But instead, going back and saying, we're going to keep at it and we're really going to try and make this process change. Last, be a good person, ethics, right? Good manners, honesty, humility, empathy, and integrity. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's really only yourself and your own reputation that you have. So let's switch a little bit here to how some of these characteristics can really play into relationships in a team dynamic. Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents, had many funny quotes, but this is one of my favorite. And basically he said, you know, if you want to be an agent of change in a team, you better play nice in the sandbox. That's essentially what he said. And in fact, there's a great deal of evidence that supports this. Mr. Sharma talks a whole lot about, in fact, the deeper your relationship is with your team members, the stronger your leadership. And really working hard to develop these relationships, both in your team and outside of your team, is really ultimately what's going to make you a success. Further is really spreading these ideas and supporting others in the team to be some sort of, a leader from within as well. Can not only be satisfying to the individual, but it can also really help motivate potentially others and ensure that the change is actually going to stay for a longer period of time. So two things I want to go over with you quickly in the anesthesia literature. I'm running out of time here. First was this great review by Dr. Scamana and Hull. So Dr. Scamana is an anesthesiologist in Boston. Dr. Hull is a organizational psychiatrist at Harvard. He works on a number of team dynamics. This first is what he did is he basically went to the operating room and he observed anesthesiologists for a period of time. And in this review, he really writes what he saw and some of the evidence that supports it. And by and large, what he felt was most important in terms of us being effective anesthesiologists on a daily basis were our interpersonal skills. I won't belabor this point. A lot of this has to do with the emotional intelligence. Dr. Duggan's going to get up and talk to us about it. But listening, speaking, creating emotional empathic connections was by far one of the most important things that he felt like really made us very effective in the operating room. These high-quality relationships, characterized by mutual trust, have been shown with a great deal of evidence to improve performance in a number of organizations. They also leave us with this illustration about how characteristics really in our anesthesia paradigm can, how they can effectively change. So the anesthesiologist as a change agent in the center, having various relationships throughout the perioperative arena, and ultimately executing appropriate practice management. Self-awareness. Am I doing things every day that are actually the best? And ultimately impacting performance improvement. Add some creativity to that, and ultimately maybe we're improving patient safety. Okay, lastly, I just want to briefly bring up this great review that was by two Switzerland, also organizational psychiatrists, Dr. Walker and Kobe. And really, they went through some of the various leadership aspects that an anesthesiologist may experience throughout the day. And essentially, they broke our workflow down into two big components. One is the more routine surgeries that we do every day, and one are the more unpredictable sort of activities that we're involved in on a regular basis. And he talks about how quickly we have to toggle in and out of these on a regular basis. For the more routine procedures, he really felt like, collaborative relationships with not only the anesthesia team, but the OR team was really probably what was most effective. Having some sort of sense of trust and mutual respect amongst team members was really what was thought to be most effective in terms of efficiency, as well as what everyone really rated as high-quality care. Now, switching over to the more unpredictable cases, it's a very different leadership style. The anesthesiologist has to stand up and start dictating things in a very quick fashion, not only to the anesthesia team, but frequently to the operating room, frequently to other folks that are coming in to give a hand. And really, once a number of these episodes were completed and they went around and talked to the team, they really felt like, again, it was these relationships that had already been established that were so effective at making things more efficient, making sure things that were important actually got executed. So, in summary, first, again, identify your path. Make sure what you're doing is really in line with your values, that it makes you happy on a regular basis. Make sure you're using your time, resources, and efforts to really support this path. Again, be so good, people cannot ignore you. Developing respectful relationship with colleagues and others in your own working environment ultimately leads to trust, ultimately leads to respect, and ultimately leads to influence. Influence and leadership in a group doesn't need to come from necessarily someone having an assigned title, but instead how they're just functioning in a group on a daily basis. And again, always maintain integrity, humility, and honesty, because in the end, it's your reputation that you have. Thank you.